I'm James O'Brien, and in this video, you'll learn why the ability to extend through the thoracic spine is so important, and why being excessively kyphotic or forward bent through the thoracic spine can be harmful. The thoracic spine is the middle portion of the spine. It is below the 7 cervical vertebrae and above the 5 lumbar vertebrae. It's where the ribs attach to the spine. It's very normal in the thoracic spine to have somewhat of a kyphosis. That's natural, that's normal. In fact, some people have no thoracic kyphosis, and that's a problem. However, what's most common and most problematic that I see is that people are excessively forward bent through the thoracic spine. And there's several problems with that. First off is it limits my shoulder mobility. If it limits my shoulder mobility, it can compromise my shoulder joint to cause shoulder pain. Secondly, it pulls me forward, so if I want to look forward, I need to lift up my head, and that compromises my neck. That's a major factor in neck pain. If my shoulder mobility is limited, if I want to get my arm up overhead, then I will compensate through my low back, which can generate low back pain. And of course, lastly, if I'm forward bent like this and I don't want to look at the floor, I will compensate through my low back. I will sway back like this, and that compresses my lumbar vertebra to generate low back pain, low back dysfunction. It's common at the transition point where one curve meets another curve that there'll be some instability. And if we're excessively kyphotic, we'll say this is forward here. If I'm excessively forward bent here, it can generate an instability at this segment right here. So as I bend forward, and especially if I didn't do it correctly through the hips, rather I excessively rounded forward through the spine, I can get the shearing forward phenomenon, and that can generate instability and pain. So why is it that we become excessively kyphotic? I'd say the number one reason is that we sit a lot. All right. So typically when people are standing, they're at least, even if they're not in great posture, they're typically not there. Okay. But it's very common when people are sitting that's exactly where they are. They'll be rounded forward like this, or they'll be back like this. And the problem is, as you do that a lot over the years, all the structures in the back will become overstretched. And over time, the vertebra will actually become compressed and wedge-shaped. So as the years go by, you will literally become fixed like this. So it's real important for you damn youngsters that when you're texting, darn it, it's real important that when you're texting or reading or doing it, whatever you're doing, that you sit upright with a nice long spine, because the more you're like this, the more likely you're going to get stuck that way as you get older. In fact, my best advice is try not to sit so much. The problem with these chairs and sofas, they're too darn comfortable. But regardless, try and stand more. Tight shoulder musculature will also pull you into a thoracic kyphosis. If your pecs, your pectoral muscles, or your lats, which are big muscles that come from your low back right up into your shoulder here, if they're really tight, they will pull you forward like this as well. Faulty bending mechanics are also a major factor in generating a thoracic kyphosis. So if I'm in the habit of bending forward like this, whether I'm doing the dishes or just working or whatever, if I'm doing this all the time, then my body will eventually get fixed that way. Rather, the correct way to bend forward is with a long spine through the hips. And you can see there's a huge difference between doing this and then doing this. Doing it the right way will help maintain that elongated spine. And if you're wondering how to do that, well, we got plenty of videos to show you how to do it on the website. Lastly, a contributing factor to an excessive amount of thoracic kyphosis would be weak abdominals. Now, that might seem a little bit counterintuitive because abdominals pull us forward like this, right? So if they're really strong, wouldn't they do the job of pulling us forward? Well, yes. However, what will often happen is because we've sat a lot and we're slouched, our abdominals don't need to work. We're already pulled forward. They don't need to do any work. If I'm standing like this, they don't need to work at all. If my abdominals are weak, I cannot prevent my low back from extending. So if they're weak, rather than extending through my thoracic spine, I have the inability to stabilize my lumbar spine. So rather than extending my thoracic spine, I extend my lumbar spine. But if I have good abdominal strength, better yet, good abdominal stability and control, I can lock my low back in place and then extend through my thoracic spine. And that's really what we want to do. So weak abdominals are also a factor in generating excessive thoracic kyphosis. All right, hopefully that will help with your understanding as to why it's so important to be able to extend through the thoracic spine, and as to why it's important to avoid activities which promote that excessive thoracic kyphosis, and it'll also help with your understanding as to why shoulder flexibility is so important, thoracic extensor strengthening is important, and of course, abdominal strengthening is important. So if you're looking for more information, keep watching the videos on the website.